Hi, this is Laura Hogan, and the research that I decided to review was titled, "I Find Google a Lot Easier Than Going to the Library Website. Imagine Ways to Innovate and Inspire Students to Use the Academic Library." This was done by Lynn Connoway, Donna Lanklos, and Erin M. Hood. And basically, this study is speaking to the academic community, academic librarians and libraries, and really indirectly to school libraries and public libraries. I thought what she was trying to answer, and like Dr. Hobbs did in her screencast, is I went down and I read through the discussion and the findings and kind of looked at some of the graphs and thought that this looked like a good article to read. I initially wasn't going to use it, but then I actually went out and read the study that Connoway did, which came before this one, and then decided that this was a good review to do. So what she's talking about in this article is right here. She's looking at a 3-year longitudinal study that identified how late-stage secondary school and first-year undergraduate school students in the U.S. and U.K. Engage with technology and information sources, and the assumptions in traditional academic library services and systems and the existing disconnect between the everyday information-seeking behaviors of members of this group, and that's what she's looking at. So I read through the study. I thought that there were also some other questions that came out of this, and so maybe, for me at least, there were some other things that I wanted to look into after reading this. So she defines in her beginning here, she defines what digital literacy and information literacy are. She uses the ALA definitions, and she uses both of these in this study. So that's what her foundation was. And then she talks about the theoretical theories that are around digital natives and digital immigrants, and basically says that this theory, though it sounds good, it might be a little weak because it's really talking about how a lot of the faculty at many academic libraries or schools are seeing that students really are coming into college without information retrieval good skills, and they're really relying heavily on Google and Wikipedia. So what she's using instead to define what these students, what skills they really have or who they are, is to define them based on a project that was done by multiple, as you can see here, the US-UK collaborative projects funded by the JISC OCLC Online Computer Library Center and Oxford University and the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. And she's using this framework to kind of describe these students. So they were visitors or residents, and a visitor is defined as someone who goes online, uses it, and then gets off and basically leaves no trace of themselves, whereas a resident sees the web as a place where they can express themselves and spend time with people, which is really what we're talking about in this class, because a lot of YA are using many digital tools. And they also have a profile of themselves out there in the social networking world. So these are the people she's talking about, basically the residents. She broke it down to 4 educational stages: emerging late secondary school first-year undergraduates, then second, third-year undergraduates, postgraduates, PhD students, and then experienced students who really are scholars. Phase 1 was interviews with these participants from their 4 project-defined educational stages in both the US and the UK, and then a subset of those who participated in monthly information diaries, so they either wrote them out, emailed them to the researchers, or they did videos of themselves. And some of the questions she's trying to answer are: do the behaviors occur because of technology? Are they characteristic of people who are in university settings? Can these differences be attributed to where they live? Are they cultural or geographic? 61 participants participated in both phases. They also looked at their parental education levels, which I thought was interesting, and their zip codes. What she also discusses is that basically the emerging literacies and how these are ongoing. Are they ongoing skill development, or is it pretty much staying the same throughout the different levels that they move through as they go through their schooling? It is definitely a user-centered study, so a lot of the information is based on what these users were doing and what they were interested in using as far as technology. And this is one of the things that I found difficult in this section of the article was her definitions of what the technology was and what the digital sources were, because she speaks of retail sites, yet she doesn't really define what retail equals. She talks about Wikipedia and Google. She talks about other social networking sites, but you can see here retail websites were discussed by 40% of the establishing participants and 50% of the embedding and experience, but she doesn't really say what those were, and even in her charts it's not defined. So I think that's really a limitation in my mind, but some of the strengths of the study were that, you know, it's really looking at the usage by the students, and also some of the confessions some of the students made, which I'll get to in a few minutes. Basically, the claims and the new knowledge she is trying to make are that she's trying to get the information of how they interact online based on the context of the situation they're in, and identifying if these behaviors change over time through their college years. So some of the questions this raised for me were, why are students not ready with search skills and usage of sources beyond Google and Wikipedia, and what's missing in their high school years? What's the missing link? What needs to be done to gain these skills prior to joining a community college or a university? And I've already done this actually, but what other studies has Connoway done in relation to this study? So some of the things I just want to point out that were interesting to me from this, reading this, you know, it's all about convenience, and students showed this when they reported their usage patterns. Many did use books, they used electronic resources, but they really were spending as little time as possible finishing their assignments. There you go, in a nutshell. They also admitted to using Wikipedia, and this was interesting. They cited references including the Wikipedia articles, but not formally acknowledging the use of Wikipedia, therefore creating a covert underground learning black market. I thought that was really interesting. She did also mention here that, you know, students gained more confidence in their ability to tell whether the information on Wikipedia was reliable or not. And maybe this gets better as they emerge as students throughout their college years. And additionally, she talks about who they ask for help from. And students typically in their emerging year, they ask their parents, basically. Emerging students contact their parents at rates at more than 48%, with a high of 58% for their mothers. And with undergraduates contacting, this was also very interesting and too funny because I made a note about this, but undergraduates contacted their fathers more than mothers because fathers would find the information for them, where mothers wanted to teach them how to find the information, which I thought was very funny. Emerging stage participants also contacted their friends 68% of the time, which is very interesting and goes back to some of the articles I read before about how people tend to turn to their friends and family for answers to questions they have rather than to a reliable source. So in this chart, it talks about who they're contacting, basically, to get information, and establishing interviewers. So these are people farther along in their schooling. Turn to friends and colleagues, which I thought was really interesting. Additionally, she talks about some of the sources that they're using for getting their information, and mentioned the use of MOOCs and Moodles. And as they get farther along in their schooling and they're more embedded in the school that they're at, they're using these more than the emerging students, which I thought was also interesting. And that 10% of students sought help from library staff to find resources, which is a really low percentage. Again, people are asking their friends and colleagues and family members. So I thought some of these points were interesting. Then she talks again more about how students view the library, and this again was really interesting to me, that a lot of the emerging students thought the library was only a place to borrow books. They all have visited the library recently, but as they, and this was another interesting point, as they got higher along in their education, then students, embedded participants, they started attributing libraries to electronic resources, which I found to be interesting. If people rely on digital sources and associate the library with books, they probably are less likely to think about the library in relation to digital sources. So again, the library image has some issues here. This is what she gets to in her conclusion or recommendations. There are 4 things, as you can see highlighted here. Market and promote library services, create simple and convenient interface designs, which we all know means to look like Google, Amazon. Many libraries are already doing this. Provide a broad range of tools, remove barriers between discovering and accessing information. And one of the things that stood out for me was the collaboration point she makes, that librarians need to really collaborate with faculty and embed themselves. She recommends that librarians embed themselves in the academic communities and in the academic courses to market and provide tools and services to the community. And this is kind of what Lanke says, which I highlight right here. I think that librarians have a real opportunity here to do this. So for me, I think many of the items that came up in this study are personally interesting. I mean, the key points for me that I took away from this were the definitions of literacy and digital literacy that she used, the academic libraries working to market their services better, and also, why are students not trained in search strategies when they get to college? What is missing, and why are they not receiving this digital training, this digital literacy training? So some of these were my questions. And then further research, I really thought the collaboration with faculty to create better use of library resources is key. I come from an HR background. We talked about collaborating with our business partners all the time. We talked about breaking down the silos. I don't think it's any different in other environments. And also, for me, I'm hoping to work in an academic library and teach students about going beyond Google, or using Google and trying to find reliable information within those sources, those resources. So I overall thought it was a great article. I learned a lot. It kind of backed up what I'm kind of working towards, I think, with my final project, and I would recommend you read it.